How to Think in English, Part 1. Hello, my dear students. My name is Mrs. Thompson, and I have been teaching English for more than 30 years. In these years, I have met all kinds of learners. Some were shy, some were confident, and some were completely scared of English. But do you know what made many of them successful? They didn't just speak English. They thought in English. I remember one of my first students, John. Oh, John was a funny boy. He loved English, but always translated everything in his head. One day, he stood up in class and proudly said, "Yesterday, I go into the park. Everyone laughed, including me. But I quickly stopped and said, 'John, don't worry. You're already thinking in English, even if it's not perfect.' That was the moment I realized something important. It's not about being perfect. It's about practicing. Today, I will share with you my own methods, stories, and even some mistakes I made while learning other languages. Yes, even teachers make mistakes. So, are you ready to learn how to think in English? Let's begin. Part 2. Why is thinking in English important? Let me tell you a secret. Learning grammar and vocabulary is important, but it's not the most important thing. To speak fluently, you need to think in English. Why? Because translating every word in your head takes too much time. Example. Imagine you are at a coffee shop. The barista asks, "What would you like to order?" If you think in your native language, your brain does this. Hear the English words. Translate them to your language. Think of the answer in your language. Translate your answer back to English. Finally, speak. By the time you finish step 5, the barista might already be serving the next person. But if you think in English, your brain does this. Hear the English words. Think of the answer directly in English. Speak. See how much faster it is. Thinking in English saves you time and helps you sound natural. A dramatic story from my class. Let me tell you about Lily, one of my students from 15 years ago. Lily was a sweet girl, but very shy. She loved English, but she was afraid to speak because she always translated everything in her head. One day, during a speaking practice, she froze. She looked at me with big, nervous eyes and said, "Mrs. Thompson, I can't do this. English is too hard." I smiled and said, "Lily, you're not alone. Do you know what I do when I'm scared? I imagine I'm talking to my cat." She laughed and said, "Your cat?" "Yes," I replied. "My cat doesn't care if I make mistakes. He just listens." After that, I gave her a simple task. "Lily, go home tonight and tell your favorite story to your cat. But here's the rule. Only use English." The next day, Lily came back with a big smile. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I did it. My cat didn't laugh at me." From that day on, Lily started thinking in English. She made small mistakes, but she became one of the best speakers in the class. Why is thinking in English difficult? Thinking in English is hard at first because your brain is used to your native language. It's like driving on the wrong side of the road. It feels strange and uncomfortable. But don't worry, it gets easier with practice. Let me share a personal story. Many years ago, I decided to learn French. I was so excited, but every time I tried to speak, I froze. One day, I went to a bakery in Paris and wanted to buy a croissant. Instead of saying, Je voudrais un croissant, he said, Je suis un croissant. The baker laughed so hard, and I wanted to disappear. But do you know what I learned? Mistakes are normal. They help us grow. After that, I practiced thinking in French every day. I started by naming simple objects like la table or Lou Payne. Slowly, I got better. Let's break it down. Here's why thinking in English is so important. It's faster. No more slow translations in your head. It's natural. You'll sound more fluent and confident. It's fun. You can play with words, create stories, and even laugh at your mistakes. So, my dear students, if you feel nervous about thinking in English, remember this. Even I, Mrs. Thompson, made funny mistakes while learning. Thinking in English is a journey, not a race. And just like Lily, John, and me, you can do it too. In the next lesson, I will share simple and practical steps to help you start thinking in English every day. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. We're going to learn how to think in English. I know this can feel like a big challenge, but trust me, with the right steps, it's not only possible, it's fun. I'll guide you step by step, and along the way, I'll share some stories and tricks that helped my students succeed. Step 1. Start with simple things. Thinking in English doesn't mean you have to speak like Shakespeare on the first day. Start small. Example. Look around you right now. What do you see? A chair? A table? A cup of tea? Try naming these objects in English. Say them in your mind. Chair, table, tea. Let me tell you about my student, Ahmed. Ahmed was from a small village and didn't know much English. One day, I asked him, "What do you do when you wake up?" He smiled shyly and said, "Mrs. Thompson, I say, toothbrush." Everyone laughed, but Ahmed explained, "When I wake up, I look at my toothbrush and say, 'Good morning, toothbrush.'" It was simple, but it worked. He was practicing English every morning. Your turn. When you wake up tomorrow, look around and name 5 objects in English. Then add one sentence. This is my toothbrush. Step 2. Use short, simple sentences. Once you're comfortable naming things, move to short sentences. Example. Instead of just saying table, think, the table is brown. I like my table. A funny memory. One of my students, Clara, once told me she was practicing English in her kitchen. She wanted to say, "I am eating a sandwich," but instead she thought, "The sandwich is eating me." I laughed so hard, and Clara did too. But guess what? She never forgot that sentence again. Your turn. Choose one object around you and make a sentence about it. For example, this is my phone. My phone is black. Step 3. Immerse yourself in English. Immersion, the magic word. Thinking in English becomes easier when your brain hears and sees English all the time. Here's some ideas. Listen to podcasts or music. Even if you don't understand every word, let the sounds fill your mind. Watch movies without subtitles. Start with simple movies or shows for children. Talk to yourself. Yes, talk to yourself in English. No one will laugh. A personal story. When I was learning Spanish, I decided to immerse myself. I watched a soap opera called La Rosa de Guadalupe. I didn't understand much at first, but I kept watching. One day, I found myself thinking, "Donde está mi café?" I laughed because I didn't even realize I was thinking in Spanish. Your turn. Pick one English podcast or show to listen to this week. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, it helps. Step 4. Build your vocabulary. Thinking in English is easier when you know more words. Example. Let's say you learned 5 new words today. Apple, car, book, friend, run. Now, make a mental picture of these words. Imagine an apple on a car, a friend holding a book, someone running with an apple. Story time. My student, Ravi, once told me he struggled to remember new words. I told him to make silly pictures in his mind. He laughed and said, "Mrs. Thompson, I imagine a chicken driving a car." But you know what? He never forgot the word car. Your turn. Learn 3 new words today and make a funny picture in your mind. Step 5. Practice different tenses. Now let's get a little creative. Practice thinking in different tenses. Example. Past. Yesterday I ate an apple. Present. I am eating an apple. Future. Tomorrow I will eat an apple. A student's challenge. One of my students, May, found tenses very confusing. She told me, "Mrs. Thompson, I can only think in the present." I gave her a fun task. Every night before bed, think about one thing you did today, one thing you are doing now, and one thing you will do tomorrow. The next day, May said, "Yesterday I watched TV. Now I am drinking tea. Tomorrow I will study English." Her confidence grew, and so will yours. Your turn. Before bed tonight, think of 3 sentences, one in the past, one in the present, and one in the future. Final thoughts for today. Remember, thinking in English is like planting a seed. At first, it's small and fragile, but with practice, it grows into a strong tree. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are like rain. They help you grow. As I always tell my students, think small, dream big, and keep practicing. In the next lesson, we'll explore how to overcome the fear of mistakes and turn them into your superpower. Until then, keep thinking in English and have fun with it. What new sentences will you think about today? Let me know. I'm excited to hear your progress. Creative ideas for practicing thinking in English. My wonderful students, thinking in English is like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, it feels awkward and shaky, but with a little creativity and practice, it becomes natural. Let me share some fun and creative ideas to help you practice thinking in English every day. Don't worry, I'll also sprinkle in some stories and laughs from my own experience. 1. Write your daily thoughts in English. Writing is a fantastic way to train your brain to think in English. Start small. Write 1 or 2 sentences about your day. Example, today the weather is sunny. I am happy. I ate pizza for lunch. It was delicious. A funny memory. One of my students, Pedro, started this habit but kept things very short. One day he showed me his diary. It said, Monday, coffee, work, sleep. Tuesday, coffee, work, sleep. I laughed and said, Pedro, where's the fun? He replied, Mrs. Thompson, I will add fun on Saturday. Your turn. At the end of each day, write 2 simple sentences about what you did. 2, talk to yourself in front of a mirror. Talking to yourself might feel strange, but it's an excellent way to practice. Stand in front of a mirror, look at yourself and say, Hello, how are you today? I feel good. Today is a great day. A memory to share. When I was learning French, I practiced in front of the mirror every morning. One day my daughter walked in and said, Mom, who are you talking to? I laughed and replied, To myself, of course. She rolled her eyes and said, Well, you're very polite to yourself. Your turn. Tomorrow morning, stand in front of a mirror and greet yourself in English. Start with something simple. Hi, I am learning English. I am doing great. 3. Answer questions in your mind in English. This is one of my favorite techniques. When you ask yourself a question during the day, answer it in English. Example. Question. What should I eat for lunch? Answer. I will eat chicken and rice. Question. What time is it? Answer. It is 2 p.m. Story time. One of my students, Fatima, told me she was nervous about speaking English. I suggested this trick. The next week, she said, Mrs. Thompson, I answered 50 questions in my mind in English. I smiled and asked, What's one example? She replied, I asked, Fatima, are you tired? And I said, Yes, I am tired, but I will study. Your turn. The next time you have a question in your mind, try answering it in English. Start with easy ones like, What am I doing now? Where am I going? 4. Imagine stories in English. Imagination is a powerful tool. Create a little story in your mind using English words. It doesn't have to be perfect, just have fun with it. Example. Imagine you are a superhero. Think about, My name is Super English. I fly around the world, helping people learn English. A silly story from my life. When I was learning Spanish, I created a funny story in my head. I imagined I was a detective solving a mystery. I thought, I am Detective Thompson. I am looking for a missing taco. It was silly, but it made me smile, and I learned new words like busker. Your turn. Create a story in your mind. Start simple. For example, I am a traveler. I go to a new country. I eat new food. Remember, practicing English doesn't have to be boring. Be creative. Be playful. Laugh at your mistakes. They are your best teachers. As I always tell my students, every word you think in English is one step closer to fluency. Which idea will you try first? I can't wait to hear your stories and see how you grow. Motivation for you, my amazing learners. Dear students, Learning to think in English is like planting a seed. At first, it's small and delicate. You need patience, care, and practice to help it grow. But over time, this little seed will become a strong tree. Your fluency, the techniques we discussed today, might feel strange at first. Talking to yourself in a mirror, writing your thoughts, or imagining stories might even make you laugh. But guess what? That's part of the fun. Remember, every small step counts. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for progress. Mistakes are your best friends. When I was learning a new language, there were days I felt stuck. But I kept going. I reminded myself, every word I learn is a brick in the house of fluency. Now it's your turn. Try these techniques. Start with one or two and practice every day. Imagine your future self thinking in English, speaking fluently, and feeling confident. You can do it. I believe in you. Let me leave you with this thought. Thinking in English isn't just a skill. It's a door to fluency and confidence in your journey to mastering the language. So, take that first step today. Open the door. I'll be cheering you on every step of the way.